Hi, I'm Teresa Greco, the host of the Happy Hour. On the show is where we talk about the things that contribute to our happiest life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. On the show today, I have an amazing guest for you. Her name is Anne Grady. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Teresa.
So, Anne, why don't you share a little bit about yourself with the listeners today?
Sure. I have spent the last 25 years working with leaders and teams as they adapt to constant change. And in my own life, have had to actually practice what I teach on more than one occasion. So I work with organizations around the world, helping them adapt to change. But when it came to my personal life, I was put in a situation where I didn't get to just teach it, I got to live it.
Okay, so now I'm intrigued. Why don't you share a little bit about that then for us, please?
So my son, Evan, was born with some intense special needs, mental illness, autism, developmental delays, learning disabilities. And his life was filled with psychiatric hospitals, residential treatment centers, group homes, self-contained classrooms. And as I tried to navigate my journey with Evan, I became sick. I ended up with a tumor that led to facial paralysis and a whole bunch of other health challenges, a degenerative back disease that forced me to adapt on more than one occasion. So sometimes we get to practice what we're teaching others, and that is certainly the case with me.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. And so what is all of that like for you now?
Well, my son is 22 and he lives in a group home where he's able to receive the round-the-clock care that he needs. And I'm still in my own journey of resilience and adaptability, learning how to navigate the emotional components, learning how to manage the logistics of it, but really found a formula or a roadmap and was able to create a set of skills so that hopefully other people don't have to reinvent the wheel. And these skills will help you build resilience, adapt, love, learn, live, and lead with intention. And it's been hugely helpful, life-saving for me.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I think we're going to dive a little bit into those today, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Now, I think one of the important things to point out when we talk about living our happiest lives is recognizing the things that are outside of our control. That oftentimes people say, if only you were different, then I'd be happy. If only this was different, then I'd be happy. If you were more like this, then I'd be happy. If things were a little less like that, then I'd be happy. Where we're pointing our fingers at everyone and everything around us, saying, if only it was different, then I'd be happy. And so we have to acknowledge that everything outside of ourselves, including ourselves, is evolving and changing. And that unfortunately, we are creatures of habit and we find safety in things remaining the same, right? Because if things are working, then you just want them always to be like that. If things aren't working, then yes, you're hoping things will change. But sometimes things aren't working and people still stay in the situation where the idea of having to change can be scary for them. And so since you help people to navigate this idea around change, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, there's two parts of what you said. So let me start with the latter first. So, your brain craves comfort, not transformation. We're, like you said, we're wired to see any change, whether that's a software update or, a life situation. Our brain is wired to see it as a threat. And so that's why we sometimes stay in bad relationships or outdated routines, not because they serve us, but because they're known. Your brain would literally rather be predictably unhappy than risk being unpredictably better. So one is understanding that any change, good or bad, any uncertainty registers as a threat with your brain, and we can learn to shift that interpretation. It's a skill. The other part you mentioned was, when there are things like, if only this would happen, then I would be happy, or if only this person would change, then I would be okay. And what I would say is you have to come to acceptance before you can adapt. Right? There's a level of acceptance that has to, that you have to come to terms with this is how this person is. This is how my life is, not how I wish it were, not how it used to be, not how I dream of it being, but this is where I am, so that you're then able to move forward with intention. Acceptance is fleeting. I deal with it every single day, trying to accept where my son is and what his life looks like. So it's not like this is a one and done, but change follows a similar pattern to grief, where we first get angry and sad and overwhelmed and can't see our way out. And then we get glimpses of, okay, I can start to make this work. And then we go back into anger and frustration. And, we fluctuate through these stages. So any kind of change is emotional, and emotions are really powerful. They drive your decisions. They shape your behaviors. They determine how you show up in the world way more than you realize. That's why emotional aptitude is the very first pillar in EvolvAbility. It's the framework for everything else.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, there were so many great things in what you just said there. Yeah, and I can't wait to be able to find out like what the tools and strategies are for us to be able to handle more of that. So can you speak to a little bit more to the things that your book, which is coming out very shortly, if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, and then I'll ask the rest of my question.
Sure. The book is actually coming out tomorrow, so I'm incredibly excited. It has been years in the making, but it's a 6-pillar roadmap to help you adapt, lead, live intentionally, recover faster, adapt quicker, and lead intentionally, especially when life goes sideways.
Mm-hmm. Which I always talk about happiness as an innate part of our spiritual self. So that part of us is always happy and happy in abundance. It's along with peace and love. So it is always that, but we may be feeling unhappy because our physical, mental, or emotional self may not be in alignment or connected to that part of ourselves that is always happy. A metaphor could be that like happiness is like the electricity that's flowing through all of the electrical outlets, and it's always there, but we don't feel it until we plug into it. So happiness for me is like that it always exists inside of us, but we may not be plugged in for various reasons. And those reasons, often I would say the mental part of us is pulling us away, but the physical part, depending on how people feel physically, if they're suffering from various dis-ease or disease in the body, it can feel hard to feel happy in our life. And so if happiness is always there present, then what it means is we have things that we need to clear, right? That if happiness is like the sun, sometimes the clouds move in front, but we need to know what are the tools, the strategies that can help return us back to the happiness that is present behind the clouds. And so if we talk more a little bit about the 6 pillars and what they are aimed at addressing, can you speak to a little bit more about what those clouds are? So, what is it that seems to impede our happiness? What are those things that interfere with us acknowledging that the happiness is always there within us? And that, as you said, you've created a bit of a map to that. You mentioned 2 things already around like people's idea of change and the fear around that. Are there any other ideas that you think that you could talk to?
Well, happiness, like any other emotion, is actually not constant. Happiness is not a trait, it's a skill. And the human brain is not designed to be happy all the time. We're actually not supposed to be happy all the time. We wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. And the other emotions serve as a way to offset that and balance it. So I think the most important thing, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression at the age of 19. And the irony of a depressed motivational speaker is not lost on me. But I think the most valuable thing that I've learned is that it's okay not to be okay, right? I think a lot of people, we live in this $11 billion a year happiness culture in the US alone. Happiness is wonderful. When you feel it, savor it, enjoy it, like really dig into that feeling and double down on it. But there is nothing wrong with you if you don't feel happy all the time. In fact, you
Mhm.
wouldn't be normal if you did. So I don't even look at it as darkness. I look at it as our life is a full range of emotions. We're supposed to experience all of them. Some of them aren't comfortable, and we try to numb them and run away from them, and often in unhealthy ways. But the problem with that is that when you try not to feel something, grief, sadness, anxiety, fear, when you try not to feel it, you actually feel it more intensely and for a longer duration. So I think of it like this. And the first pillar is emotional aptitude, understanding really how to be an emotional thermostat. How do you read emotions, take your own temperature, recognize the emotions of others, but then most importantly, how do you respond accordingly? And I think about it like, Wayne Dyer used this example, and I just love it, where if you were to slice open an orange and squeeze it, Teresa, what would come out?
Orange juice.
Orange juice, right? It doesn't matter who squeezes it or what the circumstances are, only what's inside that orange comes out. Well, the same is true with us. When we are squeezed by life, by stress, fear, anxiety, grief, that's the juice we get, right? But unlike oranges, we have way more control over what comes out than we might think we do. So the first skill, the first pillar is really understanding how your emotions show up, how they drive your behavior, how you can understand where other people are, and then respond in a way that is not out of reaction, but one that is out of intention. It's easy to lead with panic and profanity. It's another thing to really take control of your emotions and be intentional about how they cause you to show up and process the world. So, I think happiness is wonderful. I think it is a great emotion. It is not supposed to be a constant state of sunshine in our lives. We are meant to have clouds. We are meant to have storms and rain and everything in between, because that's what shapes us into the person we're becoming. We've just been taught, if you think about change like this, there's where you are right now and there's where you want to go. And in between there is this, what I call messy middle. It's uncomfortable. It's unknown. Everything is icky. That's the skill set. It's learning how to embrace that messy middle and use it as a way to grow and adapt and change rather than get buried in the discomfort.
Yes, I appreciate everything that you've said. I want to highlight the idea of being so conscious and intentional and mindful about receiving the communication of all of those aspects of us, right? That, as you said, they're really not positive or negative. It is really just our interpretation of it all, whether we're going to see it as positive or negative, that often causes a lot of the emotional feelings that we could have or pain around the situation. So I think that step number one is always tuning into that communication. What is your mental self saying about what's going on? What is your emotional self telling you about this situation? And I agree. I think part of the human experience is that we are here to experience all of it, not just the joy that we will always have on the other side, let's say, where we come here for the opportunity to feel a wide range of emotions. I think what people might find hard, though, is when those emotions are like a very, steep roller coaster, where it's like somebody's having, the extreme lows and extremes high, and you're trying to navigate that. That I think is not the healthiest way for us to go through that. That I find for me, it's kind of like this, right? It's like a little dip, a little valley, a little dip. And then, as soon as I tune into that communication, I'm able now to implement various steps. And so, as you mentioned, for like step number one is acknowledging that communication, tuning into what's happening, being mindful to all of that. And so then you can then decide how you want to take action if you need to. And whether that's just, regulating your own nervous system or whether it's taking like external action.
So let's explore that, because regulating your nervous system is a skill that I learned in my late 40s that has fundamentally changed my life. And the skill here is that when we feel that discomfort, we call it anxiety or stress, it's that physical sensation that makes us feel uncomfortable. And most of us have been taught to think our way through it. Why am I feeling anxious? I don't really need to be anxious. Let's reframe it as excitement. All of those things are great. But when you're in that state, your nervous system is dysregulated, and thinking your way through it doesn't work. It only exacerbates the issue. So, for example, one of the skills that has been so critically important to me as I've navigated illness and my son's illness and all of these things is recognizing that you can't think your way out of a physical sensation. So anytime you are feeling that discomfort, the fastest way to disrupt that loop is bottom up, meaning anything you can do to engage your physical senses, paying attention to what you feel, what you can taste, what you smell, what you see, what you hear, really engaging, going back into your body. And it sounds to me at the beginning, I was a critic because or skeptical. It sounded woo-woo to me. Like, what do you mean get out of my head and go into my body? But it's really that simple to feel the physical sensations, feel your butt on the chair, feel your clothes on your skin, feel the air on you. Intense emotional reactions only last 90 seconds if we don't fuel them with our thoughts, right? So while it's contrary to popular belief, the fastest way to get over a difficult emotion is to go through it. You have to sit in the suck. You have to hug the monster. You have to get comfortable with the discomfort, and it will pass if you don't feed it with your thoughts. This is just a habit and a practice. And it's one of the reasons, my Grammy always used to say, sweetheart, if enough people tell you you're tired, maybe you should lie down, right? Like if enough people give you the same feedback. Well, when I was going through the worst of the worst with my son and we were in physical danger, he was not safe. I was sick. I mean, the whole world was blowing up around me. And everybody kept saying, practice meditation and mindfulness. And in my head, I was like, I do not want to sit in a full lotus and have a grown-up timeout with candles. Like in my head, that's where I went because I'm a very type A person. What I learned is that it's exactly the opposite. You're just training your brain to go where you want it to go so that when the stuff hits the fan, you don't fly away, right? So it's training your brain to come back to now. Whether that's your breath, a mantra, a sound, whatever you decide to focus on, you will get distracted. That's what our brain does. The goal of meditation in mindfulness is not to never get distracted. It's to realize when you do and come back to whatever you're focusing on. And the thing you focus on doesn't matter. It could be a song you can't get out of your head or the birds chirping outside. But what you're doing is you're training your nervous system to come back to baseline. And it's a muscle. The more often you train it to come back to baseline, the easier it is for it to return there. One of the other things that I practice every single day, what's the one room that we're all going to use every day? The bathroom. Like everybody's going to use the bathroom, right? So what we know about behavior change is it's much more likely to stick if you tie a habit you want to develop to a habit you already have, right? So we use the bathroom anyway. When you're in there, let's make that time more productive. And I'm not talking about checking your email from the stall, though I know lots of people do it. But what I'm suggesting is that when you are washing your hands, and you should always wash your hands, take a moment and look in the mirror and just take your temperature. What am I feeling right now? And how is it coming across in my behavior? But more importantly, how do I want to show up next? For the next meeting, the next conversation, in my kitchen, in my living room, how do I want to show up? Because what we don't realize is emotions are contagious. We're like a mood sparkler. One, spark of calm and kindness and generosity can soften the whole room. And one spark of anger, frustration, resentfulness, whatever that emotion is, can light everything on fire. And people respond to your point, to the energy that we put out there. So we have to be really conscious and deliberate about what that is.
Oh my goodness. I love that moment of just looking at yourself in the mirror and just checking in for a moment, that moment of reflection. I just delivered my third TEDx talk yesterday, and so it won't be out probably till the summertime. But essentially, the talk was about going inward and connecting with your inner compass. And the idea was about checking in with yourself in a world that's constantly pulling you away, or in a world that's telling us, who to be and what to think and what success should mean, and that it's actually like nauseating how many voices there are that are constantly telling us, you should do this, you should, you should. It's a lot of shoulds.
Yeah.
And I think that moment of connection, and what I urge people to do in the talk, is to, instead of immediately turning to the default, which is looking on your phone and looking at everyone else doing life, is to look at yourself for a moment and ask yourself, are you showing up in the world the way that you really want to? I love what you said about the energy part, because happiness is contagious. And as you said, when you are that ray of light that comes into that dark room, everybody sees it and feels it. And it's been proven by science. So it's not just like something that we kind of sense. It's actually been proven, and to be effective, to have 3 degrees of separation too. So us just immediately impacting one person closest to us, that then impacts actually up to 3 people. So it can benefit many when we show up in the way that we actually want to. So thank you for that suggestion, because that's definitely one that I'm going to walk away with.
And congratulations on your third TED Talk. That's incredible. I've done 2 of them. And so I understand the amount of work and time and effort that goes into them. That's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, tons of work. So thank you for for acknowledging and appreciating that. It's part of my mission to help make the world a happier place. And so along with this podcast, trying to give people the practical steps, it cites research in there about the authentic inner compass, which is actually a scientific term, which is awesome. And I think that turning inward and checking in with ourselves, as often as we can, especially in the morning, instead of just reaching for your phone, is to spend a couple minutes setting intentions for the day. So have you touched on any of the other pillars yet?
Not yet. We can move on. The next is values. And this is so important. Your values are the principles that guide your decisions, that determine your behavior, that determine your priorities in life. Mm-hmm. And without you talked about your internal compass, that's what values are. They anchor you and keep you grounded when everything around you is shifting. So whether this is with your family, or whether it's with your team, or even just yourself, the first step is to identify what's most important. And it could be different in different situations, right? So when you're thinking about at work, it might be integrity or quality or efficiency. When you're at home, it might be love and respect and kindness. Ideally, those are both at work and at home, right? Like you want love and kindness and patience at work too. But you'll often go to HR offices or businesses and you'll see these framed posters of a value, right? And that it's wonderful. It's great. It feels good. But without the observable behaviors behind them that everyone has agreed upon, that's all they are. They're just posters. They're just bumper stickers, right? They're meaningless. Saying you value respect sounds noble. But what does that mean when people are tired and frustrated and the project has changed for the 3rd time in the last month, right? So values give you a shared playbook. When everybody is part of creating those values and defining what they look like in observable behaviors, then you don't have to hold people accountable. They choose it. But it does something else. These values serve as a decision-making filter. And I'll give you an example. So when my son Evan was 15, we were at a point where none of us were safe. And the idea of sending him away was gut-wrenching. His doctor put it pretty simply. He was like, look, you can keep Evan at home and ruin your family, your marriage, your daughter, your life, your career, or you can send Evan away and get him the help he needs and save your family in the process. But that's easier said than done. One, there was not a program in the entire state of Texas where I live that could take him or that was a good fit. We don't talk about mental health resources, but in the state of Texas, they're virtually non-existent. We have the least of any state in the country. So the program we found for Evan was 2,000 miles away in Idaho. They were able to provide him the round-the-clock therapeutic care he needed. But I agonized over this decision. Not only was it sending my kid 2,000 miles away, it was using our entire life savings to do it. Not guaranteed of any outcome, right? So at first, I made a list of pros and cons. I rated all the things. I vacillated daily. My husband and I just poured over this. It dominated every moment of our lives. Do we send him? Do we not send him? Well, there are two values that are important to us in our family. Well, more than that, but these two were the predominant ones in this situation. So at first you ask yourself, okay, with this decision, with this challenge, anywhere you're stuck, what is most important to you right now? And to us, we said family and peace. Those were the two most important things. So then that becomes your litmus test. Was keeping Evan home good for our family? No, it wasn't. Our family was falling apart. Our daughter was struggling with anxiety and depression. Evan felt horrible every time he had a violent outburst. It was a nightmare. Peace. Was our situation bringing us any sort of peace? We might have had fleeting moments, but it was anything but. I had already been diagnosed with a tumor. My husband had been, having his own health challenges. Our daughter was spiraling out of control. It doesn't make the decision easy, but it makes it clear. What kind of person do you want to be? What would that kind of person, parent, partner, leader do in that situation? So do I send Evan away is the wrong question. The right question was, what is most important, family and peace, and how do I reflect that in my choices, no matter what it costs, no matter how much it hurts? Now, in hindsight, I can look back and know that it was by far the best decision. It saved all of our lives. It ended up shifting everything in our world. However, the value doesn't erase the pain, but it does give it a purpose. So one, they serve as a shared playbook, setting clear expectations. When people know what's expected of them, everyone's life gets easier. Two, it helps you frame decisions based on what's most important in the moment and what choice reflects it. But values do something else. They help you make meaning of the stuff that happens. I didn't want a child who struggles as much as Evan. That wasn't what I asked for. However, I spent a lot of time in the woe is me, it's not fair. Like I had pity parties on a daily basis. It's not fair my son is sick. It's not fair my face is paralyzed. It's not fair was my daily mantra. And that may be true. Your situation might not be fair, but here's the question I would encourage you to ask yourself, which is, all right, how do I make meaning out of that? How do I give that pain a purpose? When I realized that my story could help other parents not feel so alone, when I realized I could testify in front of the Texas legislature to support mental health legislation or donate a portion of all my 4 book proceeds to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I went from being a victim of my life to a volunteer, right? It didn't change the situation, but it changed how I carried it. And so when we're clear on our values, it doesn't make everything easy, but it does give you a path forward and it keeps you grounded when everything feels chaotic.
Oh my God, it was so brilliant. And ironically, the first step in the model that I present is clarifying our values. So as soon as you started saying that, I was like, and that was exactly that. And as you said, it was a litmus test, or I present it as like a filter through
That's
which,
what I do.
yeah, to pause, reflect, and to try to make a decision based on what feels right to you, right? What feels right, that it's like there's that inner voice inside you that says, that gut instinct maybe that says it feels right or doesn't, even if like on a mental level it you're trying to make sense of it all, but then this sometimes could be contradicting that, right? And so I think it's important for us to recognize what that gut instinct, that little voice inside is saying, even when the mental self is saying, well, a good mom doesn't do that, right? Or that when you start to listen to the external noise, or when you start to consider other people's opinions about what you should have done, right? That a good mom would never have done that, right? And then you start considering other people's ideas or before your own, or before what this is telling you.
I don't have sometimes that gut feeling. I didn't know what to do. I kept asking myself, like, what does my gut say? I don't know if I didn't trust it or I don't have that intuitive sense. But
We all have it.
well, maybe mine's not trained, but in that situation, I had no idea what to do. Gut, mind, anyway, right? So that's what the value filter does. It allows you to go, okay, in this moment, what is the most important priority? It was our family. What choice reflects it? I would love to say my gut told me it was the right thing to send Evan away, but I really struggled with that decision until I framed it in what mattered most. And to your point, that serves as a filter. It doesn't make pain go away, right? That's the thing. It doesn't make everything easier. But when you are framing decisions, priorities, growth in what's most important. So here's what you do. Like if you're working with a family, or when I'm working with teams, like I'm working with teams at like Lockheed Martin and Johnson & Johnson and Microsoft. And it sounds like this is such a fluffy feely kind of activity. But what people don't realize is that when you take the guesswork away of how you treat each other, everything else gets easier. So like, let's say you're a team, right? As a team, you want to write down, brainstorm everybody's most important values for this team. What are the most important things this team should live by? Then everybody votes on the master list, right? Check off your top 3. When everybody votes, the ones with the most votes become your values. You don't want any more than a handful. But then the next step is defining what that looks like. If somebody observed you for a week, what would let them know what you value? Not your words, but your actions. So it might mean we don't interrupt each other in meetings or talk over each other, or we respond to emails within X amount of time. Like the more specific your expectations are around your value, whether it's a family or a team, when you're under pressure, it's not rules or policies that keep people grounded. It's the values they share. Families with clear values get along better. Teams with clear values perform better. It's just a performance multiplier all around because you're making decisions on what you've already determined really is your most important priority.
Yes, brilliant. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I would love to know the next one.
Okay, so optimization, and you spell the word evolve because I love a good acronym. But the next is optimizing your time, energy, and attention. These are limited resources. When you think about it, like we protect our data with passwords, we protect our house with locks, we protect our money with budgets and banks. But when it comes to our time, energy, and attention, we just kind of hand them out like samples at Costco. We just give them around. And if we don't protect our most valuable resources, then we end up in a state of constant burnout, exhaustion, and reactivity. And then we wonder what's wrong with us, right? And the truth is these are all skills. So optimization is about how do you train your attention? We already talked a little bit about that, but your attention is kind of like a flashlight. Wherever you point it determines what you feel, what you experience, how you remember an event. I'll give you an example. Since you've been listening to this, your audience says they're listening to this, and have you been listening to me talk, right? Your mind has probably wandered. You may have thought about the text that you got that you need to respond to, or wondering whether you need to hold it until the end of this interview, or why your mouth feels so oddly dry and weird right now. Now, question for you, Teresa, did you just touch your mouth? Did you just check your mouth to see if it was dry?
I don't know.
Yeah.
If I did, I didn't do it consciously.
Yeah. Well, when I mentioned it, a lot of people will go feel their mouth, right? And it's because that's where you directed your attention. Wherever we point it, we can look for the things that are wrong in our life. We can look for the things that are right in our life, but your attention determines your experience. So we have to train it. And that means reducing multitasking. And this 5-inch piece of hardware with no pulse that we give more time and attention than the people in our lives, right? Like one of the ways to take back your attention is to not allow every distraction that comes your way. When you allow the distractions, you're training your brain for short bouts of focus instead of sustained attention. It's making it more difficult to regulate, make decisions, stay focused. Anytime you resist a distraction and keep yourself where you are, that's training your brain, training your attention. Energy is another one, right? We'd often think we have this unlimited energy, but we make thousands of decisions every day. What do I eat? What do I wear? What do I respond to? What do I do here? What do I do? And the research shows that this like constant decision making adds to our cognitive load, right?
Mhm.
Imagine you have a glass of water and you keep pouring more water in. Eventually it's going to spill out. Our brain is the same way. We don't have unlimited cognitive resources. So wherever possible, we want to minimize that cognitive load and take out some water, which means take the decisions you make every single day, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, simplify it, pick one solution, try it for a week. If it saves you energy without sucking the joy out of your life, you have a winner, right? The other things, and you mentioned this in one of your questions, was a simple walk outside in the morning not only resets your circadian clock and balances your hormones, but when the world slides past you, when you're taking a walk and you've got the world kind of going by you, our eyes dart right to left. It's called optic flow. So even a 10-minute walk reduces activity in the amygdala, which is your fight or flight and motivation center, right? But it's the emotional reactive place of your brain. So movement changes all of your body chemistry. 4 minutes of brisk exercise a day, anything, 4 minutes, reduces your risk of dying from cancer by over 30%, gives you more cognitive ability, improves your ability to navigate challenges. So stand up, take a walk, move, and then for the love of everything that is holy, rest is not a reward for productivity. It is the fuel for it. And I used to laugh it off when people told me to rest, like, okay, I'll go ahead and take a spa day in between raising a mentally ill child and running a business and managing a team and trying to be a good wife and mother and still say sexy, fit, and fun. I'll go ahead and take a week off. What I learned is that when we don't take time to stop, life will do it for us. And rest is not, as much as I love to binge watch, real rest has to be intentionally disconnecting from your phone, from your screen. Take a walk, read a book, sit in silence, doodle. You have to give your brain periods of rest. And then the last resource is our time. You know, we all have the same amount of time, 86,400 seconds a day. The goal is not how we manage the time, it's how we manage ourselves within that time. And I don't think the goal is getting more done. I think the goal is doing what matters most with the time we have. So I'll give you a simple example of something I use every single day. You know, Mark Twain is famous for saying, if the first thing you do every day is eat a frog, nothing else is going to feel that bad in comparison for the rest of the day. And Brian Tracy wrote a great book called Eat That Frog. And I've got a little frog sitting on my monitor right now. It's a reminder to do the task you are dreading the most first, when you have the most cognitive energy. Because what we do is we like procrastinate it and I'll get to it later, but we don't realize how much cognitive energy you're spending dreading the thing. Whereas if you would have just gotten it done, not only do you get a surge of happy hormones that make you feel more motivated, right? But it frees up that cognitive energy to spend the rest of your time more deliberately. So optimization is really just the art and the science of making most of the limited resources that you have.
Yeah, all brilliant. There's like, 3 different tools just in that one, which I'm even just letting them kind of soak in, and I can't wait to just even replay this interview again, because you're just sharing so many amazing nuggets within it all. I like that idea of getting through the thing that might be hardest for us to get through. For me, it's exercise. Like I've been exercising regularly for like over 20 years, and if I don't get it done in the morning, it's true, then I'll just procrastinate about it for the rest of the day. And so I think that that's definitely a good strategy there. And so I want to point out that the tools that you're giving us is following the word evolve. And so as a way to get people to maybe remember what it is that you're saying. So do you mind to just maybe recap what the first 3 are in case anybody's forgotten?
So E is emotional aptitude. Read, recognize, respond to emotions intentionally. V, values. Make decisions based on what's most important, not what's most urgent. And O, optimize your time, energy, and your resources so that you are deliberate about the way you move through life, not reacting your way through it exhausted.
What I love too about the O was that many of us complain about how we feel like life is going so fast. Like, and even I have students that will say that to me. I remember last June, they're like, I can't believe it's June. And I'm like, okay, if I have like little kids telling me that that life feels like it's going fast, maybe it is. But I think part of it is that we're not present enough in our life. And so as you were speaking to that particular pillar, I feel like those were all ways for us to be present in the here and now, instead of thinking about all the things that we need to do later, or all the things that we're worried about, and all the things that like pull us away from the present moment. So I really love that one. All right, can you let me see how we're doing for time? Okay, I think we have a time for L. What is it?
Okay, so L is leadership, right? We don't go through this journey alone. We have to bring others along for the ride. And leadership has nothing to do with title. You could be trying, it's anything you do to positively influence others, right? It could be getting your teenager to clean their room. It could be getting your team to meet a deadline. It's really about building an environment where other people feel safe enough to come along with you. It really, the brain responds to change as a threat. The leader's most important job, whether you're a parent, even an individual contributor, it doesn't matter. You're still influencing other people, right? Your most important job is to create an environment of safety so that people can operate on all cylinders. When you're operating out of a place of threat, you lose access to higher level thinking, problem solving, decision making, emotional regulation. Leadership is the art of creating this ability to feel safe. It's making sure that you're doing the things that create engagement and buy-in. So getting curious, asking questions, making sure that you are practicing gratitude, which again, in my head, when I started studying all of this 15 years ago, in my head, it was like, okay, gratitude is super soft. It changes your brain. It 100% changes your physiology. When I had my tumor and I asked my doctor, what can I do to get rid of facial paralysis? He said, practice gratitude. And in my head, I was like, what do you want me to be grateful for? That I have half a face, that my kid just got out of a psych hospital, that my career might be over? He was like, well, I'd be grateful that your facial nerve didn't have to get cut and it could recover. I'd be grateful that you were able to get help for your son because many can't. I'd be grateful that you have a career where you might be able to inspire other people so they don't feel alone. And it was like when he said that, it was like a light switch went off. So I started practicing it every day when I brush my teeth, in the morning and in the afternoon, right? Almost 80% of employees who leave a job say lack of appreciation is the number one reason. It costs nothing. And it's just, I appreciate you because, fill in the blank. I appreciate because you came in this morning in a great mood and it really lifted the spirits of others. Or I appreciate that you asked a good question in the meeting. Or I appreciate that you cleaned your room without me having to ask you, right? It's creating safety. And when people feel safe, they can take risks, they can make mistakes. They can operate out of a place of fear. So they're more creative and they have better emotional regulation and better decision making. And I'll just really quickly tell you the V. So you've got leadership. V is versatility. How can you build the capacity to shift the way you think and behave based on the situation? And the final E is empowerment. The human mind needs some element of agency and control. So what can you do to take back control even when it feels like everything else is out of your control? So that's a quick run through 6 pillars.
Ah, so good. So good. I'm also a big advocate for gratitude. I think it was one of the things that, and I share this in my first TEDx talk as being one of those things that I was just doing at the end of the day. It first started where I was trying to think of 3 things that I could be grateful for from that day. And then as I started reaping the benefits of it, because you feel like, when you don't have things to be grateful for, but it's hard, but it's kind of reciprocal, right? That the more that you feel grateful for things, the better you feel about those things. And the more you invite those things into your universe too, from like a spiritual perspective, it's like us declaring, these are the things that I like in my life. And then the universe is like, oh, wow, you like those things? Let me give you more of them and more of them. So, the more that we think about the things that we appreciate, the more they start to flow into our life energetically. So, and then all the physical physiological advantages that you said. For me, I remember coming across this stat of like 1,400 biochemicals released in the body, especially if you do it first thing in the morning, that last up to 6 hours. So doing it first thing is a great way to kind of set your body, on the right foot for the day. And then imagine going into work like that, and how many interactions you might have that you're influencing all in a positive way.
And when you're focused on gratitude, it's just a state of attention. Remember, it's a flashlight. Our brain is designed to magnify the negative. It's a protection mechanism that served us well when there were tigers running through the savannas. But that negativity bias makes us much more likely to find and dwell on what's wrong. Gratitude is so powerful because you are training your state of attention to also look for what's right. You're not minimizing the negative, wearing rose-colored glasses, pretending the tough stuff doesn't exist, but you are training your brain to offset that by training it to also look for the things that are good and right. And what that does is it heals illnesses faster, lowers blood pressure, supports immune function, helps you recover faster. It lowers your risk of cancer, diabetes, inflammation. I mean, the list just goes on and on. You're putting your brain in a state of safety where it's able to operate intentionally. That's all gratitude does. It shifts your state of attention. It doesn't take away the bad stuff, but it does offset it because there's also lots of beautiful stuff around too.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned about, how a quick comment at work could make, an employee or a colleague feel that much better. I agree with you that I often feel underappreciated in one of my positions, even though I put so much heart and effort into my work. And I think it's not even enough to just say, to the whole staff, oh, we appreciate you so much. That still doesn't really make me feel all that good, saying, oh, we appreciate all the work that everyone is doing, rather than personalizing it and saying, we really appreciate you, like, for this particular thing. So is that something that you urge your leaders to do?
Yeah. So gratitude, great job, is wonderful. It's not effective. It makes people feel briefly, but it doesn't do the trick. So the way you make gratitude really effective is using the word because. So yes, you can deliver a gratitude to the whole team, but you really want to go to people individually. And that could be in a meeting, playing gratitude tag before the meeting starts, like 2 minutes. Hey, I'm grateful, Teresa, that you had me on the show. Thank you so much. It really made me feel welcome. And I loved your questions. Because I'm grateful you did this, because the more specific you can be, the better. And the research shows that when you practice it for yourself, focusing on what you're grateful for about yourself or the world around you for just like a week, you increase happiness levels for months. It's just a shift in the way you direct your attention. And the more specific you can be, the better. Think about it like this. Our relationship is a bank account, and you're always making deposits or withdrawals. And if you take more withdrawals than you put in, you overdraft. You can't influence, lead, or create safety for others when they're constantly in a withdrawal situation. Deposits are easy, they're free, but you have to make more of them than you think you need to. So it's not enough to just go, Teresa, great job on the interview today. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions. It really caused me to think about this work in a different way. Thank you for that. That sincere gratitude, that changes the way people work. It changes their engagement, their mental health, everything in between.
And if we were to translate that to into the family, how could you maybe, commend your children for, I don't know, whether they're doing well, well at school, or how they're helping out at home? Is there a particular way that it could, hit them a little bit more, rather than, oh yeah, your report card's really great. It maybe just falls a bit flat.
Yeah, I talk about this in the versatility pillar. One of the worst things a parent can do is praise their kids on their grades. You got all A's. I was a straight A student, and I learned nothing because I was regurgitating it for the test because I wanted to maintain the identity that I was a good student. When you praise your kids on the outcome, You're saying this is your identity. You're a good student. You're smart, which makes them likely to feel not smart and not a good student if they make a mistake or fail. I would way rather praise kids on, I know you didn't do well on that test, but I love how you went back and asked the teacher if you could try to understand where you missed the questions. Or I know that AP class was hard for you, but I'm so proud of you. Even if you didn't get the right grade, I'm so proud of you for working hard and forcing and pushing through that. Now, I will say this, we live in a country where our education system is based on that outcome. Like my daughter came home in the 9th grade crying that she couldn't get into the University of Texas because of a grade she got. And it's heartbreaking to see that. But what ends up happening, like she was a straight A student, she got to college, failed an assignment, and it threw her entire identity for a loop. When we tie our identity to an outcome, you're a good athlete, you're a good student, you're good at this, what we do is undermine performance and potential. The goal should be praising your kids for how hard they're working, for the effort that they're putting in. The outcome's important, yes, but how you got there is way more important, because that's what determines your grit and your resilience and your agility, not just getting an A on the test because it was easy for you. I wish I would have gone back and done that differently with my kids.
Yeah, beautiful. And as an educator, that really hits home for me too. I think that that was just a great point for, how teachers maybe commend the students in class and taking that moment.
I mean, I taught college, and I remember having a student who got up and it was so easy for them. I taught speech, and I had one student who just gave a great speech. I mean, it was just easy for her. She got up, she gave a great speech. Everybody clapped. It was wonderful. I had another student, he was deathly afraid, like literally got hives in his throat, had panic attacks worrying about this speech. He got up and gave a speech that wasn't as great, but he got a higher grade because he did the effort and the work and stood up there and did it and pushed through it. Whereas for her, it just came so easily, she didn't even have to work at it very hard. And I wanted everybody to experience a challenge, right? She could have picked a harder topic where she had to research or dig in. She picked something easy. He had to go through the effort of really pushing through the discomfort. That's what we should be rewarding.
Yes, it's beautiful. Now, I'm so excited for your book. So maybe you could tell people a little bit more about where they can find it and where they can connect with you as well.
Yes, so the book is available on Amazon tomorrow, EvolvAbility, Growing Forward When Life Goes Sideways, and it's full of really practical tips and tools and strategies. But you can also follow me at myevolvability.com. And there is a place for you to download a free EvolvAbility index so that you can find out your current level of adaptability, where you're doing great, where you might be able to make some small adjustments, but myevolvability.com.
Awesome. Anne, thank you so much for being on the show today. This interview was incredible.
Oh, Teresa, thank you for having me. I appreciate your thoughtful questions, truly. And congratulations again on your TED Talk.
Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to staying connected after the show.
Me as well.
If you like the show today, please like and subscribe. To find out more about my speaking and coaching services, check out my website at teresagreco.ca or connect with me on social media at @TeresaGreco_Steps to Happiness or Steps to Happiness with Teresa Greco.